Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my reaction to Canelo Alvarez winning via unanimous decision versus William Scull. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into this. So of course, like I say, Canelo winning via unanimous decision. He did get the job done in the end, unlike of course Ryan Garcia the night before, where he of course was not able to do so, but he did get the job done. He didn't do it in a fashion in which I'm sure many fans were expecting, including myself, and really wanting. This weekend was branded as and seen as this huge boxing weekend, which was going to be providing great, excellent fights, huge names, and was going to be really entertaining. And so far it's not really lived up to that expectation. I mean, Canelo and William Scull, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's the lowest ever punch output thrown fight in a 12 round fight. Whether that's a 12 round world title fight or just a 12 round fight in general, I'm not entirely sure. But still, that is a crazy stat to have for a fight in which, Canelo Alvarez, he's an aggressive fighter. He is gonna be wanting to throw a lot, and he's not a runaway type of fighter, but he typically is able to get fighters up against the ropes and be able to handle them in that way. But as I said in my prediction before the fight, he hasn't fought a fighter who's as defensive as William Scull in a while, to be completely honest, because he was just running around the entire time, and realistically he wasn't really doing that much. He was just running around, throwing the occasional shot, and just aiming to not really get destroyed, I suppose. With that mindset, he was never going to win the fight. Obviously, to be fair, that's kind of how he won the title, to get the IBF title, but for the most part, he still didn't do that much in that fight, and easily the fight could have gone to Shishkin in that way as well. So it was just a strategy that realistically never was going to work. But it did kind of throw up some underlying, not issues, but maybe negatives of Canelo's style to an extent, because everybody's been talking about him slowing down. It's made it more interesting to see, he's getting a lot more people judging his performances. He wasn't able to cut off the ring, like I say, as well as what he has been in previous fights. And, against maybe the last time that he fought a more defensive fighter, which was quite a few years ago. And maybe that's, like I say, the fact that he is slowing down. He seemingly got quite frustrated. He was throwing a couple punches which were a bit more rabid type punches. They weren't really, they were just thrown to out of frustration and anger. And he said during his post-fight interview that he was genuinely just frustrated and he didn't like the way that Scull was fighting. And so, yes, it's understandable, because somebody like a Canelo knows how to put on a show and wants to put on a show and wants to, create hype for him against somebody like Crawford, who he's next going to fight. But it was, yeah, like I say, it was interesting. It just showed that maybe against them more defensive fighters, which Crawford is, he's not as defensive anywhere near so as much as William Scull, but he does have a really good solid defense. And if he can work on that, as well as, mixing in the attacks when Canelo gets frustrated, there could be a route to victory there for Crawford. And obviously, we now see for the undisputed titles, Canelo versus Crawford. It is Dana White's first major boxing TKO boxing promoted fight, and I don't necessarily know what that means. I don't know how involved Dana White's going to be, and I don't necessarily know, how he's going to promote it any differently. Is he going to bring anything more interesting into the promotion? I'm not entirely sure, but everybody was suspecting that this would be the first fight to be promoted by Dana White, so it's not too surprising of news, but still, it's just it's going to be a great fight, I'm sure, because it's two great names. But I just don't know if having Dana White in the sport is going to be a positive thing for boxing. I don't necessarily know if he quite understands the landscape of boxing and the history of boxing to be able to create and showcase the masterpieces, because I just don't believe he can just replicate his strategy in which he uses with the UFC and have the same level of success? I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, we have to wait and see. I mean, he's getting a huge pedestal to try out whatever he wants to try out with boxing, of course, with probably the biggest fight of the year in Canelo and Crawford. But again, like I say, it's interesting. But as a fight, I think Canelo Crawford is still going to be an amazing fight. I think Canelo, a lot of people are now coming off that last performance of his against Scull just last night and are saying things as like he isn't as good, Crawford will be able to have a lot of success against him and things like that. But to be fair, after Crawford fought Madrimov, a lot of people were saying that Canelo would be able to have a lot of success against Crawford. It flips so quickly, and boxing fans are always so quick to comment and say things like that, and it's always going to be a great fight, Canelo and Crawford. There probably will be a rematch, and there's no surprise in that. It won't be as bad of a matchup as this was with William Scull, but nonetheless, as a fight, Canelo has done enough to win back his IBF title. It was, nobody was really overly excited for this fight, I believe, because nobody really knew too much of William Scull. But like I say, he did what he had to do, and did end up, of course, with the win on Cinco de Mayo weekend, yet again winning on that amazing Mexican weekend. But to speak about some of the other fights on this card, Munguia was able to win by unanimous decision versus Bruno Surace and avenge his defeat, which was of course, such a shocking defeat, but he looked good. I said that he was able to be able to win by unanimous decision. I didn't think he'd be able to get the knockout because I didn't think he would be overly looking for the knockout. I think in the first fight he was way too relaxed, he was way too comfortable, he was really just searching for the stoppage, especially when he knocked him down early, and it just inevitably led for him to be just lazy, get caught, and that's a boxing lesson that any fighter who is up and coming can take realistically, to just not switch off and just be lazy and be too aggressive, because that's what's going to happen. But in this performance, he had Eddie Reynoso in his corner, and he looked very good. He was able to have the same kind of level of success, and he was able to throw from wherever he wanted. He was able to, come in and come out. He had his hands up much higher. He looked a lot sharper. He was coming in with combinations at a good time, but like I say, returning back his punches high to his head. And in general, he just looked better, sharper, more controlled. That Jaime Munguia, in which we saw before Bruno Surace, who was performing better with each fight, and does have defensive traits which aren't crazily amazing, but are not as bad as what we saw at the start of his career, and he is improving. And so that was a coming of age, maybe to an extent, type fighter performance in which he definitely needed for his career. And now he's going to put himself back into the mix. And realistically, who can he go on to fight? It's not a fight like this, isn't a fight which has raised his stock crazy amounts. Of course, he didn't get a knockout or anything like that, but maybe a Belanga Shiraz winner could still be in the mix for something like a Munguia. Now he's involved and working with His Excellency, that could very much be made. Of course, Badou Jack won by majority decision versus Noel Mikaeljan to remain WBC World Cruiserweight Champion at 41 years of age. It's a great and very impressive feat for him to be able to do, and for the most part, it was quite a close fight. I think Mikaeljan was able to have bits of success, but I didn't think that any of the shots in which he was landing really came with much venom. I think a lot of them were arm punches. Even when he was going down to the body, it looked like he was slapping quite a bit. Badou Jack was able to come with definitely the more, powerful shots which were catching Mikaeljan out. You could definitely tell that Mikaeljan hadn't faced, or wasn't used to facing somebody with that level of power. Of course, he fought Briadis, and that was relatively well contested fight for Mikaeljan, but Briadis has got his own, of course, very good level of power, but that was a while ago, and I think Badou Jack definitely caught him by surprise to an extent. But at the same time, both fighters were having to shake off so much ring rust pretty much instantly, because of course neither of them have really been that consistent fighting at all. But it was still impressive. I still have Badou Jack winning, and I think inevitably at 41 years of age, it's a great performance. I think if he goes on to fight Ryan Rizicki, Rizicki isn't the most technical of fighters, but he's definitely going to be giving more into his shots. He's going to be more rugged, and he does have a route to victory there, Rizicki. I don't think Rizicki could beat Jaya Pataya or Azurda Ramirez, but I also don't think Badou Jack will beat either of them two guys as well. So I think there is still a clear gap between Jaya Pataya and Azurda Ramirez, the top, in my opinion, the top level cruiserweights, and that of Badou Jack or Ryan Rizicki or somebody just that little bit lower, in my opinion. And like I said, there's still the world title on the line, and WBC belt is still a very reputable belt to have, but yeah, I think he probably will go on to fight Rizicki next. Hopefully, it's not in a million years because I mean, if he gives another 2 years out, then we're going to be waiting for Badou Jack to be fighting when he's going on 45 at this point. And he still didn't look bad. He was able to still win. I mean, he's always in close fights. That's pretty much been his entire career. And he's been fighting for such a long time at such a high level now. But yeah, I think against one more big, powerful puncher, he might show his age, and I think possibly somebody like a Ryan Rizicki could do that. But then to speak about one final fight in which I want to talk about that was on this card, FA Ajagba drawing versus Martin Bakole. Pretty much this is a 10-round contest which was 5 rounds. The first 5 rounds to the first guy being FA Ajagba, the second 5 rounds being to the other guy in Martin Bakole. FA Ajagba looked good, to be fair to him. I mean, he came in very good shape, and Martin Bakole, he came in a bit better shape than he did versus Joseph Parker, but I just felt like if he was going to be, learning lessons from that Parker fight, he should have learned more so that coming in heavier wasn't necessarily a good thing. He did seem to lose weight, but I just thought he'd be coming in that bit more lighter. He seemingly was still heavier than what he was against Jared Anderson, and it showed. And F.A. Jagba was able to have success landing the straight shots and keeping Martin Bakole at range for the most part. And even he was even able to shorten up his shots a little bit, his straight shots, when he got in relatively close exchanges in the early part of the fight to Jagba. But inevitably Martin Bakole did close the distance. I think FA wanted to make a statement early on in the fight and showcase that he's not going to just get walked through. And he came into this fight, there was a bit of a back and forth between the two of them. They had this kind of dispute of who's the best African heavyweight, but he had that pride on the line, and he showed that in the first few rounds. But I think he did inevitably get tired, and I think he let Bakole walk him down a bit more and get in a bit closer. And he was able to land them shots, which we're getting used to for Bakole. And Bakole, I think, is always gonna be an issue for any heavyweight, but I just don't necessarily know if he's going to be able to become a world champion. I think that's been shown. He had this initial hype when he beat Jared Anderson, but now, the Parker fight showed that he can't come in on short notice and do, wonderful things. He can't shock the world. But this Ajagba performance has really shown that there is limitations to his game, and he maybe isn't as disciplined as perhaps he should be, and inevitably I think that could stop him from ever becoming a world champion. And like I say, for now we have it as a draw. Will we see him fight again against Ajagba? Maybe. Ajagba's stock is definitely rose from this fight. I was going into this fight saying that there was no good reputable top rank heavyweights. Ajagba's proved me wrong. He shows that he can fight at a world level, and so full credit to him. But at the same time, Bakole could maybe go on to fight somebody else. Maybe he could go on to fight Jarrell Miller. Maybe he could go on to fight an Andy Ruiz. One of them guys, any of them guys. Why not? I think there's a lot of fun matchups we can have with Martin Bakole, but like I say, I just don't think they're ever going to lead to a world title unless he can really get back in shape and can really prove me wrong in another performance. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like video if you did, need like video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.